We're here at the Global Trends Track, kindly sponsored by App Annie. So here's a message from our sponsor.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session with App Annie. Today, we're going to be going over a number of interesting market trends that we have observed over the first 3 quarters of 2021. Before we jump into, just want to highlight that App Annie is a mobile market estimate service provider, and we're not an investment advisor. So everything we're going to show you here today is obviously estimates, and then we're going to drive into those different trends that we're observing. Quick intro for me. My name is Tato. I'm a senior account manager here at App Annie, and also we're looking a lot of gaming customers across EMEA. I've been in the company for around 5 years now. So, and App Annie itself has been around the market for over 10 years. And obviously, we're working with a lot of different gaming companies across Europe and across the world as well. With that, let's directly jump into mobile gaming market trends, right? So the first one I want to show you guys is basically the new normal that we're seeing. For a lot of times, in the beginning, everyone thought that this would be like a COVID-related new norm that we would see. You see those spikes in the charts during the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdown. But what we're seeing is that the increased engagement, increased number of downloads, revenue, and also time spent is remaining. And what we're seeing is the crazy numbers: over 1 billion downloads, over 1.7 billion in consumer spend, and over 5 billion hours spent per week in mobile games globally, right? Obviously, we do see a bit of a decline here in the hours spent. However, what's most important is the consumer spend and the remaining and growth that we're still observing. To further highlight that, if you look at the average weekly consumer spend in mobile games over the last 3 years in Q3, you can see 35% increase in Q3 2021. So that just shows you and kind of confirms the increased interest in mobile games. If you look at some of the top games worldwide, obviously you see quite variety across the downloads, consumer spend, and monthly active users. If you look at download side, My Talking Angela 2 that was released in Q3 had a tremendous launch. You obviously have a lot of hyper casual games that are still dominating in terms of downloads. However, you see Free Fire, PUBG Mobile, Subway Surfer, Roblox, Candy Crush there as well. In terms of consumer spend, obviously Roblox has been absolutely killing it in 2021, and in Q3 they also came in #1. Genshin Impact is there. Pokemon Go had a big jump, as you can see, 6 positions up. And then you have the likes of Coin Master, Honor of Kings, etc., etc. And then monthly active users, you have usual suspects like PUBG Mobile, Roblox, and Candy Crush. Now, if you look at on the breakout games, right? So the games that had the best quarter-over-quarter growth, obviously you have My Talking Angela. Obviously they had tremendous launch as mentioned, but then you have a lot of hyper casual games with a 3D in their title. So a lot of runner games, a lot of kind of shooting arrow type of games that we've seen on the market. On the consumer spend side, the #1 position is quite interesting. Odin Valhalla Rising. This is a Korea-specific game that is only available in Korea that has been absolutely killing it. And then you have a number of interesting IPs there. Harry Potter, Magic Awakened has been performing really, really well. And then you have Royal Match as well that is being, talk of a lot of different people in the market. And then monthly active users, again, a lot of hyper casual. My Talking Angela 2 also sitting on the top there. Looking at the top EMEA HQ publishers worldwide revenue, so you have usual suspects: Playrix, Supercell, Playtika, Unactive, Stillfront. All of those guys performing really, really well. If you look at the breakdown, there's a lot of Israeli publishers there, a lot of Nordics, and Russia, Belarus, etc. Top market. So this one is quite interesting. So as you can see, Russia has actually become the top market in terms of downloads in Q3, and they had 3% growth quarter over quarter. Turkey number one, number two, and had a slight decline. Then you have France, UK, Germany, the usual kind of the big European markets. But what's interesting is the consumer spend, right? In terms of consumer spend, you see the Germany, UK, France, which everyone would expect to be on the top, right? They're the traditional European markets, always driving consumer spend. But you see now Russia appearing in number four position, right? And that's 14% growth quarter over quarter. So what that means is basically Russia is already number one market in terms of downloads, and then it also catching up with top European markets in terms of consumer spend, right? So Russia soon will be one of the most lucrative markets in Europe to operate and acquire users in for your games. And then the rest, you have the usual ones. You have Italy, Netherlands, Spain, etc., etc. As you can see, majority of the markets did have a decline in consumer spend in Q3, but that's kind of normal because of the summertime. Usually Q3 is the most quiet period, and then the Q4 everything picks up as the holiday season kicks in. Now we can jump into straight to specific genre trends that we have observed. In order to do that, we're leveraging our Game IQ taxonomy that we've curated to better understand what mobile gaming genres and subgenres are growing or declining. And with that, in this view, we're looking at the fastest genres over the last three quarters from download and active user perspective, right? So as you can see, hyper casual, still dominating, still number one. You see the last 3-quarter trend here. So they're still growing in terms of active users, in terms of downloads. The most interesting one, and the one that had the biggest jump in active users, was simulation genre. They've had tremendous Q2 to Q3 jump, as you can see here. Action games also had a great jump, and then you have match and the rest of the bunch there as well. In terms of the monetization, right? So here we're talking about the in-app revenue. So in this view, we're looking at revenue versus active users. And again, we're looking at in-app revenue. So that's why you're not seeing hyper casual games, high up. Obviously, they monetize, 99% of their monetization is coming through ads. But you see the likes of simulation games, action games, match, etc. However, the ARPU leaders basically are RPG games, right? So they are able to drive the most revenue based on the active users they have. And then you have strategy games also not far behind them. And then casino games is quite interesting. They don't have a lot of users, right? They don't have the high user base. However, they were able to monetize that user base really, really well. Lastly, if you look at basically the specific subgenres and their specific growth, and we're looking at in Europe specifically now, you can see that by revenue, it's 4x marked battle strategy games, being number one, and they had 14% year-over-year growth. Then you have M3 Meta, Team Battle, even though they had slight decline. However, you can see that they're still number 3, and then you have M3 Meta, M3 Saga in the top 5, and the slots casino games also appearing in the top 5. In terms of downloads, no surprise here, hyper casual making up 4 out of the top 5 most downloaded subgenres. And you have kids other games also kind of filling up the number 4 position. And then the rest, you have driving games, simulation sports games, pet simulation games, etc., etc. Now, if we do a bit of a deep dive into what are the demographics that are driving these subgenres, right? You can clearly see that there are some genres are clearly male-driven and some genres are clearly female-driven, right? And then what's interesting is that for the male-driven genres, which would be your strategy, sports, racing, shooting, RPG, and action games, it's always the younger demographic or Gen Z that is the most dominant demographic that we observe. While if you look at the female-driven games or female-driven genres, that will be your match games, puzzle, tabletop games, simulation, casino, and even hyper-casual actually, then you see much more diversity in the demographic, right? So you do have the Gen Z, you have the boomers, you have millennials there as well. So it's quite a bit more diverse when it comes to female-driven games. Now, the next one here, we're going to look into different ways that you can basically optimize your game and better understand how certain games are performing better than the other games, right? And we looked at 3 different examples of how you can understand from monetization perspective or engagement perspective or time spent perspective, how certain games are driving their performance, right? In this case, we're looking at driving engagement. And the example we want to use here is that the poker games, right? So everyone knows the top 2 biggest poker games out there, which would be from Zynga and then the World Series of Poker by Playtika. But when we looked at the average sessions per user and average time per user, we saw that actually it was the Governor of Poker 3 that was driving the most engagement in the games, in their games. So that was kind of interesting stat to see. So we decided to investigate what could be the reason behind that, right? And when I went to the Game IQ deep tag to understand what are the features that one game has versus another game, it was clear that Governor Poker 3 was using a quite unusual social aspect of the game, which would be guilds and clans and cooperative development tasks for a poker game, right? So these are, guilds and clans are quite normal in strategy games, but it's the only poker game that we saw out of all the bunch that was actually using this social, aspect of the gaming. And it's quite interesting how that has actually resulted in increased engagement. So that is just one simple example. The next one, we're looking at RPD, right? So revenue per download. And I was looking at Empire Simulation RPG games, and then you have Game of Sultans and King Throne, right? And you can clearly see that Game of Sultans has pretty much almost double the RPD of the King's Throne, right? And again, this is interesting to see. The games are quite similar, to understand like, hey, what are the differences between the 2 games? And here, again, we went to Game IQ deep tags and we looked at the monetization aspects now, right? So, and what we saw is that Game of Sultans has actually multiple soft currencies and also uses, rewarding video ads as a monetization mechanic. So it clearly shows you the differences as well as actually cosmetics, right? So, and it clearly shows you that 2 games are taking a very different type of approach in terms of the monetization, in terms of how they want to engage and monetize their audience, right? So again, this gives you an idea why there is such a big gap. And then lastly, we looked at the D1 retention, right? So everyone in the industry is looking at the retention. How can we make the users stay in the game or come back to the game more frequently, and how can we increase that? And in this case, we're looking at some of top 3 biggest battle royale games or shooting games out there. So you have Free Fire, Call of Duty, and PUBG Mobile. And when we looked at D1 retention on Android specifically, we saw that Free Fire was actually performing better than the other bunch, right? And they've been consistently up. There have been a few months where Call of Duty was better, but then they again overtook them. And in this case, we were like, okay, what is the biggest influence of D1 retention, right? And it's actually the first time user onboarding, right? So whenever the user downloads the app, what's the experience they're getting with the game in the first 10, 15, 20 minutes? And when we looked at that, it was quite shockingly big difference between these 3 games. If you look at Free Fire, they're pretty much done with the tutorial after like 4 minutes, right? They don't push any, monetization. They don't push any customization. They don't force you to do anything. They just straight away give you a quick tutorial, and afterwards they let you to play the game, and then everything else happens after that. While in PUBG Mobile and Call of Duty, you see that the onboardings are quite a bit longer, first of all, and then second of all, there's a lot of different stuff that they're trying to push, like customization, try to even monetize the user within the first few minutes, right? So this could be one of the reasons why, for example, Free Fire has a better D1 retention, because the user can get to the gameplay much faster and not be stuck in the different loops and customizations and monetization, etc. With that, we actually conclude our today's session. So if you guys want to, check out more from App Annie, feel free to reach out to different representatives that we have globally, and we'll see you soon.